1 minute. T-minus 50 seconds. T-minus 40 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It's initializing. Always the way with technology. There we go. So for those that are coming on now, I just want to introduce our guest. This is L.A Marzulli, and I'm sure you recognize him. We have been talking about some of your stuff in church recently, and L.A is renowned in a lot of different ways, in the sense that he's a theologian, that he's a researcher, that he's a lecturer, and his work in regards to the supernatural, the connection with aliens, UFOs, the connection with the Nephilim, the seed war, all of those things. So when I say I'm out of my depth, I'm out of my depth. But I want to welcome him on. And guys, as you're coming on, you can say happy birthday, because I know it was his birthday yesterday. So I want to start, Ellie, with sort of talking about and trying to set the scene a little bit. I recently read, when I say recently, earlier in the year, I read one of Dr. Michael Heiser's books, The Unseen Realm, and it sort of opened up Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, that the territories of men are ruled or covered by the B'nai Elohim. And I know that you have extensive knowledge when it comes to this, and I kind of want to sort of go down that route a little bit, if possible, in terms of what are the Watchers, or who were the Watchers, who are the Nephilim, and maybe you could just start with that for anybody that's going to come on, just to explain a little. Watchers, or who were the Watchers, who are the Nephilim, and maybe you could just start with that for anybody that's going to come on, just to explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, we certainly miss Dr. Mike Heiser. Mike and I were kind of friends 23 years ago when I published my first book, and he reached out to me. And then we sort of kind of drifted apart, which is fine. I'm actually reading The Unseen Realm. I have never read it, so I'm actually wading through that. And, you know, Mike was an incredible scholar. He was amazing. The Watchers are a class of angels. We know this because Daniel talks about a watcher, a holy one, in the book of Daniel. So we know that they're not all bad. Some of them are good, but some of them fell with the dragon. And that's where it gets complex, because the Watchers that we read about in the book of Enoch are different than the watcher, a holy one that comes down to Daniel. But, you know, a lot of this is speculation. I mean, when is the last time anybody sat down with a watcher angel and interviewed them and said, hey, you know, how many are you? What's it like?
Yeah.
You know, how do you receive messages from the Lord? What's heaven like? Is there a divine council? Do you guys all get together and sort of vote on things? Or, I mean, is everything set in stone? When did the rebellion happen? What about the bad guys? I mean, it's just like, you know, you want to sit down and ask all those questions. Unfortunately, the biblical prophetic narrative is silent on most of it. We get little glimpses of it. So the Genesis 3:15 prophetic narrative is, in my opinion, the gateway to the rest of the Bible. It's the gateway to the rest of the biblical narrative. And in that little vignette, we see Adam and Eve, which have just blown it. They've sided with the dragon. Something unbelievable has happened to them, because they're no longer the same people that they were before partaking of this whatever it was that they partook of, whether it's an apple or fruit or some. We don't know what it is, but in my opinion, they have sided with the dragon. They believed him. So death enters the human race for the first time, and they realize they're not or some. We don't know what it is, but in my opinion, they have sided with the dragon. They believed him. So death enters the human race for the first time, and they realize they're not wearing any clothes, and they're hiding from the Lord. I mean,
Hmm.
this is it's just so profound. Absolutely, absolutely so profound. Absolutely so profound. Absolutely so profound. What happens in just that little moment of time.
Hmm.
So in that little vignette, you've got the pre-incarnate Jesus, pre-incarnate Messiah, who talks to the dragon. So the dragon, the woman, and Messiah. That's in that little vignette. And
Yeah.
Jesus says to the dragon, "Your seed, your offspring, will be at war at enmity with the seed, the offspring of the woman, the one coming from the woman, the proto-evangelium, which is the first prophecy in the Bible, the
Hmm.
Messiah, who crushed the dragon's head. You will bruise his heel." Well, when was the last time anybody heard a sermon on that? You usually don't. And I owe this really to Gary Stearman. We were at the Russ Dizdar and I were putting together a conference, the Nephilim Mounds conference in Ohio, and we flew Gary in, and Gary opened up the conference with his now a must hear um, uh, talk presentation on "It's All About the Seed." And Gary unpacked Genesis 3:15 and illuminated that and talked about it really for an hour. And we were all just dead quiet because we had never heard this before. I knew Genesis 6, but I never put Genesis 3:15 ahead of Genesis 6, and of course it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And Genesis 3:15 is the key to the Bible, and that's over a decade ago. I think that happened, and the rest is history. Um, Genesis 3:15 sets the tone for the entire biblical narrative because it's the seed, the offspring of the dragon will be at war with the offspring of the woman. We know that, and they
Yeah.
go at it 3 chapters later in Genesis 6. So the Nephilim are the offspring of the fallen angels and the women of earth, and we know that from Jude, who talks about the angels who left their first estate going after strange flesh. Well, what the heck does that mean? We
Hmm.
also know the book of Enoch, which is a
Yeah.
non canonical book, but Jude quotes the book of Enoch. And we
Hmm.
know that the book of Enoch was widely read. If you were going to keep one book, Enoch 1,
Yeah.
from people, that's the book you keep. That's the book that you go out of your way to burying until R.H. Charles discovered it in the Ethiopia in the Ethiopian Bible and translated it into English. It was essentially no one knew about it. It
Hmm.
was buried, literally buried. So the dragon, in my opinion, did a great job of
Yeah.
burying the one book which illuminates exactly what happens way back in the Genesis narrative. There's also a stele. We were going to go to Israel. Um, in October. October 7th, we were supposed to be there.
Yeah.
So at the last minute, we're at the Prophecy Watchers conference.
Hmm.
And on Saturday morning, Bob Ulrich calls me and goes, "Israel's at war." I go, "What?" We were supposed to be on a plane that afternoon
Hmm.
heading to Atlanta, where we were going to stay overnight. And the next day in Atlanta, Sunday, we were going from Atlanta to Tel Aviv. That was the plan, and the Nephilim tour. And every place we go, most of it is in the north, is in the
Hmm.
Golan.
Yeah.
So all that's shut down. Everybody in the north has already evacuated and moved away from the cities.
Hmm.
Um, Kiryat Shimona has 23,000 people. 20,000 of them have left the city. So that just gives you an idea.
Yeah.
So we were going to go to Israel, and one of the places is Mount Hermon. there was a stele that was discovered there, and it basically states that there's an oath that these watchers um, basically committed an oath that on on Mount Hermon thousands of years ago that we are they who created this oath. You know, we're the fallen ones. We came down to mix our seed with the women of earth, which is exactly what Genesis 3:15 tells us is going to
Hmm.
happen. Then surprise, surprise, 3 chapters later, it explodes in Genesis 6, which results in the flood. But then it happens continually after that, and then it goes into modernity,
Hmm.
where that angel that appears to Daniel tells him that seal up the words in this book, Daniel, until the time of the end. So Daniel is sealed.
Hmm.
People have looked at it, but they didn't understand it. One of the passages which has been incredibly enigmatic for centuries has been Daniel 2:43. Their seed will mingle with the seed of
Yeah.
men, but they will not cleave to them. Well, the angel who's talking to Daniel throws him a spiritual clue, supernatural clue, and tells Daniel what the end times is going to look like. Men will run to and fro over the face of the earth, knowledge will increase. Well, if you plot on a graph mankind's progress from 2,500 years ago, when that angel was discussing things and telling Daniel what it's going to look like at the time of the end. It's flatline.
Yeah.
Nothing changes to Gutenberg. Then you get the
Hmm.
Chinese with gunpowder, Gutenberg with the printing press, and then we start moving into the Industrial Revolution. That changes
Hmm.
everything. And now in the modern era, at the turn of the last century, the 19th and the 20th, everything just explodes. I mean, you think about the modern conveniences that we have today. I mean, the electric light bulb, that didn't exist 200
No.
years ago. It wasn't there. The
Hmm.
airplane, refrigeration, elevator, um, hydraulics. I mean, everything that high skyscrapers. I mean, every nuance of modernity has been achieved in the last 150 years. It's absolutely unbelievable. The steam engine, that goes
Hmm.
back, we're nearing on over 150 years. But I mean, the invention of a steam engine, the railway. I mean, and all this came about from a Eurocentric viewpoint. And
Yeah.
of course, when I say that, I'm immediately labeled a racist. But the reason why it sprung from a Eurocentric um, paradigm was because of the Protestant Reformation. So,
Hmm.
for the first time in history of all mankind, pretty much, we had people that were part of the Reformation understood that, wow, I have liberty.
Hmm.
And so, a perfect example of that is the Wright brothers. Now, you couldn't do this a couple hundred years ago. But the
Yeah.
Wright brothers have a bicycle shop, and but they're also going. Maybe we can make a flying machine. So they have their bicycle shop. That's liberty. That's democracy. That's
Hmm.
capitalism. They're selling bicycles. People are buying them. But in their spare time, what are they creating? They're working on an airplane. And so the Wright
Yeah.
brothers achieve flight. And this is why people go, well, that's racist. It's not racist. It's you can trace it back to the Reformation, and all of a sudden from that, because America and democracy springs, the springboard for that is the Reformation. Like it or not, guys like John Locke, I mean everybody, they're influencing the founding fathers. There's no doubt about that. And this, for the first time in history, men and women have the liberty to do the things that they want to do. And you go around in other countries, they don't have that. People don't
No,
have that.
I
So
think he's coming back on now. There we are. You're back.
yeah. So the idea of the Protestant Reformation and liberty creates modernity and all this incredible um, just conveniences that we enjoy. So Daniel is saying that the angel to Daniel that knowledge will increase.
Yeah.
Yes, there it is. And men and women will run to and fro over the face of the earth. Well,
Hmm.
as I'm speaking to you right now, there are thousands of airplanes
Yeah.
taking men and women over and around the face of the earth, which is unprecedented,
Hmm.
absolutely unprecedented. So we're in the window of time where the angel's prophecy has come to pass. Now the book of Daniel unfolds. And in
Hmm.
that book, chapter 2, verse 43, we read, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. Who are they? Not men. So
Yeah.
we're looking once again at the mingling of the seed, which goes back to what? Genesis 3:15. And this brings us into the modern day UFO abduction phenomena.
Hmm.
And this is where we are.
So I would look at that as well, and I would say I would agree with you that I would say the last 150 years specifically, there's been a growth towards convergence. You've had that marked with scientific, so-called scientific, I would say religion such as Darwinism in 1859, and the move away from special creation. And then it was Darwin's cousin, Sir Francis Galton, who coined the phrase eugenics, which to me is like a big painting of where they're going. You know, you're not created in God's image, create yourself in a different image. Very similar to Genesis 6 and, you know, what happened with the seed war. So I would say the seed war and everything that you just mentioned as kind of the meat and bones of spiritual warfare. And it seems to all be converging right now. And we have seen this year Fox News, we've seen the American Senate all have discussions around UAPs, UFOs, and do you think that the very fact that the narrative is now becoming very mainstream, that this is sort of preparing people for something?
Pastor Gary, I have been banging this drum for over 25 years,
Okay.
literally.
Yeah.
I was signed with Zondervan for my first book, Nephilim, The Truth is Here, which talks about the whole underground bases and UFOs and giants and the mingling of the seed and all this. I was signed there in 1998. So that's, we're looking at 25 years ago. But
Yeah.
I've been banging this drum for 30 years. I've been a ufologist all my life. I mean,
Mhm.
since I saw my first one when I was 12 years old at Boy Scout camp.
Yeah.
Yes, the bottom line is yes, they are rolling it out. When David Grush is in front of our Congress congressional hearing, and he is asked by Representative Mace, did were there bodies in these crashed discs? Were they retrieved? He said, and she says yes. And then Representative Mace asked David Grush, the whistleblower, were these biologics human or non-human? And he looks right at her and he said, these biologics were non-human.
Hmm.
So I mean, the cat's out of the bag in ways that are just unbelievable. But at the same time, Grush is doing this. And Grush was just on Tucker Carlson's show this week
Yes. Yeah.
here in the States, basically reiterating, well, not a lot of new information, but reiterating what we already know.
Hmm.
We are on the verge of the Great Deception,
Yeah.
a phrase that I believe I coined. Now,
Hmm.
whether I did or not, who knows? But it's in my first book and my first novel, Nephilim, The Truth is Here. And in that, one of the characters talks about the coming Great Deception. That's how
Hmm.
he labels it. Whether
Yeah.
someone else came up with that, I don't know. But as far as I know, you know, okay, it doesn't matter. You can't copyright a phrase. But the bottom line is, we are in the window of time where the great deception is upon us. There's no doubt about it.
Hmm.
There was an email that I got this morning from a woman who was watching an interview. I haven't seen the interview, but I read the transcript real quickly. And this man had like an encounter with the Lord in 2014, and the Lord was telling him what it would look like when he would return. And the Lord told him that people would be talking about aliens
Yeah.
and UFOs. And this is in 2014. Well, that didn't start till 2017. And so we're here in this window of time where it's just coming to be. It's coming to pass. It's unfolding right in front of us to the point where our Congress is talking about the phenomena in ways that I've never seen.
Hmm.
So the coming great, and the idea of this cat and mouse game, people report UFOs. I mean, I get stuff across my desk all the
Yeah.
time. For the most part, they're lights way up high in the sky, making maneuvers, standing still, no noise, all that. And that's close encounters of the first kind. But in our films, We talk with people that have been abducted. We talk about the seed war. We just published a book in our publishing company, Spiral of Life. That's our publishing company, by Karen Wilkinson, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She was an abductee. She was taken numerous times. She was groomed by them. And we've heard this before. She was impregnated by them 3 times, and they came back and re abducted her and took the baby in the 3rd month of pregnancy. And in our cattle mutilation film, which is number 6 in our ongoing UFO series, and if you want to see that, folks, you can see all of our films by going to streaming.lamarzulli.net. A lot of you are across the pond, and to ship a DVD over there is astronomical. So instead of that, we've got a streaming site, streaming.lamarzulli.net. All the films are there, and we're talking about the cattle mutilation film, which is number 6, and the abduction film, which is number 4. 5 is on crop circles. So we're the only Christian ministry that has this. We'll have 9 films in the series when we're done, and we're just releasing Roswell 1,
Yeah.
which is called Exoneration, and Roswell 2 in the debris field. We'll get into that maybe in a little bit. But Karen was abducted numerous times, and she was impregnated. So they come back and they take the baby at the end of the 3rd month, at the end of the 1st trimester. Well, what happens to that child, that entity? In my opinion, first of all, it's not a human child because it's a mixing of the seed, which is Genesis 3:15, which is Daniel 2:43. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men. We're in it. So the cattle mutilation, they drain the cow of all the blood, and they're taking certain parts of the animal, the sex organs, the eye, the lungs. They're just taking material. What happens to this? In our opinion, and I want to thank my business partner Gil Zimmerman and I, because we worked on these films, and we're desperately trying to get them out because the Lord gave me direction months ago to get all these films out by the end of the year. We have 1 film left to go.
Right.
When he told me those marching orders in early March, okay, we only had 4 films out. So since then, actually, we only had 3 films out. So 4 is on abductions, 5 is on crop circles, 6 is on the cattle mutilations, 7 and 8 are on Roswell. I mean, do the math. That's a lot of films to put out in 1 year. And number 9 is What is the Truth? Okay, so cattle mutilations. The blood is drained, material is taken. Hold that thought. Bovine blood can be used in human transfusion. How about that? And that's a medical fact. It's a medical fact. You can go online, you can Google that up. They use right now bovine blood, cow blood in human transfusions, especially in war zones. A cow has 6 gallons of blood in it, just to give you an idea. So the blood is interchangeable. You've got a baby, a child, a fetus taken from a woman that can't live outside the womb. Can't. It's not going to come into maturity. It still has to go through its process. Guess what they're doing, in our opinion? And we may be the first people on both sides of the aisle ever to connect the dots. These entities are creating artificial wombs so that entity taken from the woman who's been abducted and impregnated and re-abducted, and that baby is taken, it goes into the artificial womb and comes to full term. That's a first.
With the purpose to that, like as you're saying that, all I keep hearing, thinking of is this 200 million man army in Revelation 16. The idea that there's some sort of purpose behind the hybrid creation, in the sense that, because that's the way my thought process is going. Is this for a purpose? Is this creating some sort of hybrid Nephilim type army? In the sense that whenever you see, because I would always attribute the 200 million man army to a demon army, as in the last days, but I don't know if am I way off base there.
It's hard to say. What is part of that 200 million man army? I mean, we don't know. Is it just the Chinese? And we don't know. Is it a demonic deal? We don't know. So that's why I hold on to all this stuff very loosely. But what
Yeah.
I do know is that people are being taken. It is the seed war. It's Daniel 243 on steroids, absolutely. And the enemy, the dragon, is definitely building an army. There's no doubt about that. That's what he's doing. And the cattle mutilations have been ongoing for decades. Law enforcement has never brought anyone to, you know, to justice. They've never done that. And again, when a farmer sees this, it's unprecedented. There's no
Yeah.
tracks around the animal. It's been carved up. There's
Hmm.
no blood. There's no traces of blood. It's like it was just placed or dropped from the sky. And so, our film is we interviewed Chuck Zukowski, who's done like 50 investigations on these cattle mutilations. We interviewed Rancher Miller, who's lost 16 head of cattle on his ranch. Okay. We interviewed um, a woman that is very familiar with UFOs and ufology, and Judy Messeline, and she runs this little UFO hotspot uh, in Colorado in the middle of nowhere. And we interviewed her about Snippy the horse, which was ground zero in the United States anyway for
Yeah.
the mutilations way back in the 60s. She actually has the skeleton of Snippy in the museum. And when they found Snippy, when they went in and did a necropsy on the horse, the brain was missing. When they
Hmm.
opened her up, the lungs were gone. How is that possible? How is it possible? It's not. You're looking at something that is otherworldly and definitely supernatural with a nefarious agenda. See, the problem is, as I see it, that the church at large won't even dip its toe into any
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
Won't even look at it. And I applaud you, Pastor Gary, for having people like Mondo Gonzalez on, myself, and other people that are exposing the darkness. Our mission statement, by the way, in Spiral of Life, my publishing company, our company is called Spiral of Life. Let me
Hmm.
start there. And the Spiral of Life, the logo is, and Da Vinci's favorite famous picture, the
Yes.
finger of God touching Adam.
Yeah.
So we've got the finger of God, and from the finger of God, we've got the double helix spiral, the DNA spiral. So that's why we call it Spiral of Life, because all life comes from it. Darwinism is the biggest bunch of hooey that's ever been um,
Yeah.
hoisted on the peoples of the world. There's no proof for it, and
No.
yet it's just taken as fact. That's how the powers that be. And if you say anything, well, you're an ignoramus. Well, you're stupid. Darwinism. You just believe in superstition. Blah 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 blah. Well, you just show me where the first self-replicating molecule comes from.
Yeah.
So, spiral of life, that deoxyribonucleic acid, that double helix, the spiral of life, that's our company. But our mission statement is to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air and to herald the return of the King, Jesus. And that's what we're doing. So
Yeah.
we're exposing the deception. We're warning the body of Messiah not what is coming, what is already here. And remember,
Hmm.
I've been banging this drum for 30 years. It falls for the most part on deaf ears, which is
Yeah.
fine. That's not my that's not my. I don't have to worry about that. That's up to him. He opens doors. We go through them.
Hmm.
We're faithful. We create the films. I write the books. Do all this stuff. Um, and what happens to them after that is none of my business. I mean, I'm on shows like this all the time, telling
Yeah.
people, go to streaming.lamarzulli.net, sit down, invite a bunch of people over, watch the videos, go to
Yeah.
school and learn. We've done the homework, so you don't have to.
Well, I was reading this, and it
There
is
you go.
chocker block full of information, and not just information, but pictures of skulls, pictures of fossilized bones, and so on. And I guess it sort of hits me that you can start to see a demonic strategy with the likes of Darwinism and, like I said, taking away special creation, but also coming against a flood narrative, trying to counter a flood narrative, deny a flood narrative. Yet, if you look at every culture across the world, every major culture has a worldwide sort of deluge story. And
Yeah,
then
they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you look at
Where's
Nephilim,
that from?
the giants, the giant sort of race. Like even here, about 10 to 15 minutes away from our church, there is a place called the Giant's Ring, and it predates the pyramids. It's 2,700 BC, and the myth, like a lot of people will sort of deny the mythology behind it, but the mythology behind it is that there was a race of people called the Tuatha, which were a race of god people that were worshipped. And the Giant's Ring in mythology is believed to be a place of the worship of the head of those god people, Nuada, and people would come and they would worship there. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, it's about 180 meters in diameter, complete perfect circle, and then there's a wee structure in the middle, and then there's a mound around it about just under 4 meters all the way around this. And the Irish mythology tells you that this Tuath De Danann, this people became what is colloquially known as fairies, right? But they were this god race people, and they begot a giant race. So there's a massive sort of giant culture over here. We have the Giant's Causeway, one of our biggest attractions, in the north, about Finn McCool, this giant that lived there, and there's all the mythology around that. But what I'm saying is if you look at cultures around the world that couldn't be seen as, I guess, biblical in attitude or biblical in background, they all seem to support the Genesis 6 account. And if Jesus likens the days of the end times, the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 24:37, to the days of Noah, it would be a great strategy of the enemy to try and throw as much confusion and doubt upon that as possible, so that the people are blind to this season. And I don't know. I know we were talking beforehand, and you were talking about your film on Roswell, and maybe you could share what you have unearthed there, just a little bit of what you've unearthed there.
I will, but I want to circle back. I can't pronounce the name of the stone circle of a giant, but I need to talk to you because
Okay.
I've been wanting to go to Ireland, um, obviously in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably late summer, and we want to film there. We want to film at that site. I can't
Yeah.
pronounce it. I know about it. I've read
Yeah.
about it, but you just pronounced it. I'm going, oh,
Yeah.
that's how you,
Yeah.
because I have no idea.
I'll take you there. We go up every year because it's become a place of occult worship.
Hmm.
So we know that there's witches that congregate there at certain times
Yeah,
of the year.
they
So we
know.
will go up and pray.
Yep, they know exactly what it is. Just like the
Yeah.
Serpent Mound in Ohio, the
Yeah.
witches and the occultists know exactly who built this and what
Yeah.
it was. The modern day archaeologists insist that it has nothing to do with anything. But I want to go there,
Yeah.
and I know there's other sites. So we need to talk. Maybe we can plan a trip because right
Yeah.
now, um, yeah, I mean, we could. I need to film that. I really
Yeah.
do.
100%. We'll help out in as whatever way we can. We'll be your tour guides
I
and take you
we got
around.
something going.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
we got something going here. So the Roswell deal, for those of you who don't know, in 1947, something crashed outside the little town of Roswell. Now, the town of Roswell at the time was the 509th bombing was stationed there, and the 509th bombing group was the bombing group that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the time of the crash, there was a lightning storm, and it definitely hit a craft which was about 100 feet wide. How do we know that? There were eyewitnesses that saw the craft coming down like this. It was 100 feet wide. We're talking something really
Big.
big,
Yeah.
really big. It hit, and when it hit, it might have split apart. This is conjecture, but the debris field is where rancher Mac Brazel, who was tending his sheep and his cattle, came into the debris field with a pasture, and he saw all this wreckage. and he didn't know what it was. So he put some of it in the box. He went to town, called the sheriff. The sheriff met with them, and the sheriff then picked up the phone and calls the 509th Bombing Group, okay, because they're not sure what they're looking at, and that's where Major Jesse Marcel Sr. enters this scenario, which will change his life and his entire family's life and continue to do that for decades. We call this film Roswell Revisited Exoneration because in the film we seek to exonerate the Marcel name, and I think we achieve our goal because we sit down with Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. in a written interview, which was conducted before his death. We sit down with his widow Jesse Marcel Jr.'s widow, Linda Marcel, first time on camera, his daughter Denise, and one of his best friends, Dr. Richard O'Connor. And in this, we show very, very clearly that this was not what the official story was. And there's a clip that we show of Major Marcel Sr., who says on the record that both he and General Ramey, knew exactly what was going on here. But I digress. Okay. So the sheriff calls up the 509th base, and Jesse Marcel Sr., Major Marcel, is dispatched with Mac Brazel, the rancher, to Mac Brazel's ranch. Marcel inspects the material. He's never seen anything like it. He gathers some of this up, puts it in a box, puts it in his car, drives back to Roswell. Now, the debris field is almost a 2-hour drive outside of Roswell. It is in the middle of nowhere. I was just there this year. I was at the debris field. And let me tell you, it is, when I say isolated and remote, you can't see anything. It's just miles and miles and miles of open rangeland, which is what they use it for. It's free range cattle all over the place. So Major Marcel's there with Mac Brazel. He's never seen anything like this. He gathers some of the material up, puts it in the box, goes back, and at this point, the story gets really cool because he takes the material out of the box and puts it on the floor and on the table of his kitchen. Wakes up his wife, wakes up his son, brings them down, and goes, "Guys, look at this. You'll probably never see anything like this again. This is from something from another world." He takes it back, and now the Roswell Daily prints that famous headline, "Army recovers flying disc." It's right there. And then General Ramey, 24 hours later, says, no, 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 not so fast. It was just a weather balloon. At this point in the story, Marcel Sr. is trotted out to a press conference. The flashbulbs are going. Ramey's holding a telegram. In front of Marcel is a weather balloon. And Marcel is like looking at Ramey like, you got to be kidding me. Like, what? And that's where the cover up begins. And it's from there, it's decades. But we've got it on film, where Jesse Marcel Sr., now he's an old man, says, and General Ramey and I knew exactly that this, what was recovered in the field, was something completely different. We also have two witnesses that talk about Colonel Hill. Colonel Hill was OSS, which is the forerunner of our CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, over here. Hill was an interrogator during World War II. At the time of and this is the deathbed confession, he passed away about a month after he told Jim and Carolyn Rankin, who were his caregivers, okay, about a month before he passed away. So it's secondhand information, but I went with it because both Jim and Carolyn are pastors, and they're I mean, you look at their body language, they're telling you the truth. They're telling you exactly what they were told by Colonel Hill. So Colonel Hill was dispatched to Roswell from Dallas-Fort Worth within 48 hours after the crash. One of the bodies, one of the aliens, is still alive. Colonel Hill still tries to make contact and communicate with it, and he fails. He can't. And he describes what they looked like. They were small in stature, big eyes. They had 6 fingers. They were wearing a silver jumpsuit. We also have a clip from Frankie Rowe, whose father was one of the firemen who was dispatched to there's 2 sites. It's a skip site. So the craft comes down like this, It hits the ground. Here's the UFO. Hits the ground and skips. That's the debris field. Then it goes another 16 miles and crashes into the hill. That's the second site. That's where the bodies were located. So now we know that there's two sites. Where Marcel was the skip site, the first site, where the craft came down and shattered, and then the interior flew another 16 miles and crashed. That's where the bodies were found.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and our in two films,
Yeah.
Exoneration and The Debris Field. We found metal. We took Frank Kimbler and Chuck Zukowski came out with us. They were our guides to the debris field, and you can see my face. I'm all lit up because I've been reading about the debris field since I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, Charles Berlitz, the
Yeah.
Roswell thing. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm all over this, and I can't. I'm pinching myself. I can't even believe I'm in the debris field, but I am. And I've got two guys with metal detectors, and
Mhm.
they're out there with the metal detectors, and we pray and we ask the Lord for favor and to show us what's here, and we
Yeah.
repent of the things that happened here. We do that. We take back the land for the Lord. We
See,
rededicate the land.
as you say, like when you were looking at that when you were 16. 16 was the first. I was 16 years old when it was the first time I ever saw what I could only sort of qualify as a UAP or UFO in the sky about 40, 50 feet above me, blinding light, and the way it moved like no other object in the sense that it didn't fly like a plane would. It just, and it was so ridiculously fast. And I thinking about that I didn't speak about that with people. And then my father passed 2 years ago, and about a month after his passing, sitting out in our backyard and saw the same thing.
Wow.
Very, very similar, happen again. And again, I think that there's been this timidity for anybody speaking about seeing anything like this because what happened with Roswell, what happened with the, trying to, I guess, mock and undermine any statement that came out from there, kind of put people on the back foot that, well, I'm not going to say anything like that. I'm not going to be counted as a kook. And I think as well with the church has shied away. Well, I've noticed, how much the church shies away from the supernatural, despite the fact that we read a supernatural book and we serve a supernatural God. But do you think that when it comes to, everything that came out in the Senate here and everything that came out on the news and all of the reports about biologics, do you think that there was maybe a plan or a ploy to undermine that afterwards? Because then we saw, I think it was the Mexican sort of unveiling of things, and I
Let
don't
me
know.
speak to that.
Yeah,
Let me speak to that. So David Grush, we've already talked about that. Congressional hearing, United States. Representative Mace is asking Grush where they retrieved bodies, biologics. He says yes. Were they human or non-human? Non-human. It's not picked up by any major news agency in the United States that I'm
yeah,
aware of.
yeah.
Fox, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, nobody covers it. It's a non-event. Nobody covers it at all. 2 weeks later, Jaime Maussan, I love Jaime. I know him personally. He appears in our Watchers series. He let us use real UFO footage. But for whatever reason, Jaime trots out these two, in my opinion, 100% bogus, fake alien bodies.
Hmm.
And this goes viral. This
Yeah,
goes viral. Why is that? It's called deliberate obfuscation, is what it
okay.
is. So it's like everybody looking at this goes, oh, this is all a bunch of hooey. These things are fake. They're paper mache,
Hmm.
And I had a radiologist over on your side of the pond who wouldn't come on the record because he can't. He'll
Yeah,
lose his job. That's how
yeah,
the. But he said he looked at the X-rays and they were, in his opinion, they were a complete construct. It wasn't, and it's just like the ferry that we debunked, and I talked about that. The ferry was put together by a taxidermist. It was a
yeah.
construct. That's how these goofy mummies from Mexico. But what do you see? What does the media pick up on? The media picks up on the goofy mummies from Mexico, not what David Grush says in a
Yeah.
congressional hearing. And that is a managed agenda, in my opinion, totally a managed agenda. And the powers that be control the information that we receive. For instance, if you go on, let's say most of the news of the major news medias in our country, you don't hear word one about what's going on over in Israel,
Yeah.
which is the formation of end time prophecy.
Psalm 83.
Because
Yeah.
Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38, Isaiah 17, we don't know what we're looking at yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Check it twice a day, once in the morning, Raptor News, Divine Justice, the other website I go to, on YouTube. I watch the reports daily. Each report's about 15 to 20 minutes long. In the morning, I hit Raptor News. In the evening, I go to Divine Justice. And then I look at the Jerusalem Post, who at least tells me what's going on.
Yeah.
All eyes are on the north right now. And they're already playing footsie with Damascus. And since this whole thing's begun, Hezbollah and other proxies of Iran have been hitting U.S. bases in Iraq and in Syria. So
Yeah.
it's just a question of when is it going to explode in the north, and it will. I mean, they've already. This is a prolonged war, protracted war. This thing's
Yeah.
not going to end in 2 weeks. It's going to go on and on and on. And they're not. The IDF will not stop in Gaza until they've completely crushed Hamas. So it's gone and over, and they need to, because these people. I mean, look what happened on in October, and it's been going on and on and on for 35 years with these clowns ever since. Well, whatever. Ever since the Israelis gave up the Gaza Strip,
Yeah.
we show this in our Watchers film. As the Israeli citizens are leaving, the mortar fire, the rockets are coming over. So the Israelis give land for peace, but they get no peace. And for
Mhm.
people who are trying to tell us from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, you have no idea what history is.
Yeah.
And history is this: at the end of World War One, all those countries that we see, which are now independent sovereign countries, were created by the Brits and the French. They were part of the Turkish Empire, the
Yep.
Ottoman Empire.
Yep.
So the modern countries of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine, Israel, were created out of thin air by the Brits. So
Mhm.
if we're gonna give all this back, then all those other countries, they have to lose their sovereignty too,
Yep.
including Egypt.
Yep.
So if we're gonna go to Israel, we'll ship them all to Canada. I get it, no problem. Or we'll give them a state of Utah here in the United States. They can have their own state, whatever. If we're going to do that, then Iraq, and Lebanon, and Syria, and Jordan,
Yeah.
all that goes back to the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
But see, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. People need to understand what history really says, and that Israel has a right to the land. There's a book I used to have before my house burned. It was from 1921, and the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Arab guy, the Grand Mufti, big guy in
Yeah.
the Islamic world, goes on the record and states this: that the Temple Mount, which we know, was always Israel, was always that of the Jews.
Yeah.
He says it. Now all that's been redacted. What a coinkydink. But Israel has a right to the land. If Israel has no right to the land, then let's give it all back to the Turks.
Do you not even think, like, my degrees in history, and I look around nowadays and I see the generation coming through. There's such a detachment from history. I think there was a survey done recently that 20% of under 30-year-olds
Have no
don't
clue.
believe in the Holocaust.
No, they don't.
And that's
It's
just it's crazy. But even when you look at it under those terms, and I think that even if you see people like Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, he too has said that the Temple Mount is an Israeli religious focal point. It is very down the list when it comes to Islam. It is an Israeli focal point. And I just think that when you look at this, if we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And even when you see that probably goes into what we've been talking about in the terms of the Nephilim and so on, and that we can see through every major culture that there was a giant legend, mythology, history. There was all of this sort of was kind of accepted up to a point, and then in the last while, in the last 100 years or so, it's kind of like, well, no, that's just mythology, that's legend, that's fairy tale. But I know that you found, and I know I'm aware of your time here, so I'm going to try and rush. Um, I know that you've examined certain things and looked at skulls, and maybe you can talk a little bit to that and the evidence that you've actually unearthed in your travels.
Yeah. And this is why, before we started rolling the tape here, I said, there's right now, there's 29 films. Now,
Yeah.
granted, Roswell 1 and Roswell 2 aren't up on the streaming site, but they will be probably in another week. So
Yeah.
streaming.lamarzulli.net, you can watch. But there's 29 films. We'll have 30 films done. Probably in another 3 weeks, we'll have the last film done, which
Hmm.
is What is the Truth? And that'll
Yeah.
be up on our streaming site also. So, I mean, there's a body of work here, a corpus of work that in an hour interview, we're kind of hopping all over the place,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is fine. I get that. So the hypothesis I had, a long time ago was that if the Nephilim are on the earth and Joshua and Caleb in the Bible is true, then we
Hmm.
should find evidence of the Nephilim. And guess what? We do. And
Okay.
and the whole idea was if they were here, then where's the evidence of this? We know that Joshua and Caleb come into the promised land basically 3,500 years ago. And then we see a diaspora of these giants. And we
Hmm.
can trace it all through the Mediterranean, right? They island hop. They go from Cyprus to Gozo to, um, oh my gosh, my mind just went blank, to Sardinia,
Uh-huh.
um, and then into Majorca, and then the bottom of Spain, and then you get the Amorites, and it's all the beaker culture. They're coming in
Yeah.
through Spain over to Portugal, where we see these huge sites in Portugal, into
Hmm.
France, Karnak with the 80,000 standing stone, then into the British Isles, and then over to your neck of the woods, and from there you can just basically island hop to the New World, and
Yeah.
we know from America Stonehenge, okay, we know this, that the Celts, the Amorites were over here. We know that. We
Yeah.
have, without a doubt, because it's written in Iberian Punic on the bell stone, in America Stonehenge, to bow the Canaanites in dedication. What's that doing in New Hampshire? It
Hmm.
shouldn't be there. And that
Yeah.
was buried, but I digress. So our hypothesis was if there's a diaspora of these giants, of these Nephilim tribes, will we see vestiges of them? Enter the elongated skulls in Paracas, Peru. These people, entities, show up in Paracas about 3,500 years ago, 3,000 years ago. That fits the timeline. Fits the timeline. They have textiles which are completely different than any other indigenous tribe in the area. They have pottery and earthenware, which is it must have been done on a wheel, had to have been done on a wheel. And the wheel wasn't invented in South America, it's pre Columbian, until
Yeah.
Columbus comes over, until the Spanish come over, and that's it. So we did DNA testing, Mondo Gonzalez and I, with the late Richard Shaw, and Chase Klotsky, a ufologist, and also uh, she's field study, and she tagged and bagged everything for us. And now those samples went out to 3 different labs, and the preponderance of the DNA showed a Middle Eastern connection, specifically from the Black Sea, the Levant, and Eastern Europe. That rewrites history. Of
Wow.
course, the
Yeah.
academics don't like that and immediately
Yeah.
go, "Well, Marzulli's not Marzulli's, dealing in pseudoscience." Well, excuse me, it's not pseudoscience. Our
Yeah.
protocols, it's all on film, are above board. Mondo and I aren't just skipping in there. We've talked to the DNA lab in Canada. We've ordered from them, I think, 40 or 50 lab suits. We changed out of our lab suits for every single skull that we examined. A lab
Hmm.
suit we had a net over our head, basically a hood, a face mask. We had double sleeves on the arms. We had gloves, full body suit, and boots. And we would blow each other off with compressed air outside the room as we were changing into the suits? Contamination? And we took our DNA? I don't think so. You
Yeah.
guys just don't like the evidence.
Yeah.
You don't like what it points to because it rewrites history. And you call us pseudoscience, but it's not pseudoscience, it's real science. But
Mhm.
because you don't like the what we discovered, you just resort to ad hominem attacks. I'll
Yeah.
stand by our research, and so will the DNA lab in Canada and the other ones. The other ones, I won't mention their names, I don't want to embarrass them, won't even talk to us anymore because we're pseudoscientists. But here are our protocols. You know, why won't you examine the DNA evidence? Because you're afraid to,
Yeah.
because it does rewrite history, and it points to the fact that something supernatural is mixing the seed. Genesis 3:15, which we
Yeah.
talked about in the very beginning. So, I mean, that I had a guy who was a microbiologist. Don't know his name. He came up to me at a conference recently this year.
Hmm.
And he introduced himself and said, "Hi, LA. I'm a microbiologist. I can't come on the record with this because I can't. But I want you to know something that people in academia are talking about your DNA evidence, talking about it. You've created a buzz. They won't go public with it. It's well under the radar. I'm working with a geneticist right now who is working on trying to create the entire genome from the DNA samples that we've gotten. That's all I'll say about that.
Hmm.
He's born again, he's spirit filled. And the reason why he's doing this was because of our initial findings.
Yeah.
Armando Gonzalez is a bona fide archaeologist. We're not making this stuff up. And our protocols are we've been told from other researchers, from geneticists, people at labs, wow, your field research was second to none because we're at a museum. You know, we're not in a laboratory in a sealed room, but we're in a museum. But our protocols were very stringent, and this is how we were able to do it. And, you know, don't attack me. I don't care what you call me. Yeah, I'm a pseudoscientist, right? But I'm out in the field. I'm actually uncovering stuff, just like in Roswell. I guess that makes me a pseudoscientist too, because we actually went out into the field at Roswell and we found two pieces of the metal. That's pseudoscientists, all right, LA.
Yeah.
We all know it's a weather balloon. Quit making stuff up. No, it's like, you know, you guys get off your duffs. You get your own funding because we had funding from people who will never come on the record, but they
Yeah.
gave us a boatload of money. Which, thank you guys, if you're watching this, thank you, and you know who you are. And they gave us a boatload of money, which enabled us to mount the expedition, to pay the labs, and we've you know we've proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I would say in a court of law, absolutely, because we've got all these different samples from all these different skulls, which are pointing back to a Middle East origin. We're not making this up.
The problem is though is that yeah, I think for academia, your evidence supports biblical narrative, and that always is
And that's
going
what,
to
that's what I'm
upset
afraid of.
people. You know, we've got like a couple of minutes. I will try and get you off really quickly. And again, thank you for coming on, and thank you specifically around this time, your birthday and so on. So I've got a couple of questions here that have come through.
Sure.
If you don't mind, one person's asked, "Do
No,
you
no
believe
problem.
the Nephilim are still here, or will there be a return?"
Watch. They're here, and
Mhm.
watch our film, Watchers 10 on the Kandahar Giant. Just watch that film, and you can watch
Okay.
that by going to stream. You know, for a price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks, $5, you can
Yeah.
watch the entire film. Give me a break. What you
Yeah.
know, if people, I don't spend the money. Then fine, don't
Yeah.
spend the money. But that's why we got them on streaming. So,
Yeah.
you know, right after this interview, you can go to streaming.lamarzulli.net, Watchers 10,
Uh huh.
Watchers 10, Kandahar Giant, and you can hear the testimony. And that was the one that got the deep state on us.
Yeah.
They didn't like that. They didn't like people talking about the Kandahar Giant. No, 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 no. That was the big no no. And I was threatened three different times. They're
Really.
here. They're oh, absolutely. They're here. They've been here perhaps for thousands of years, but there's also this new breeding program. So
Yes. Yeah.
in our films, we talk about the breeding program. We talk about people encountering these hybrids. We talk about this. This is my life's work to
Yeah.
expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air. So yeah, they're here. It's just like the days of Noah.
Yeah.
Jesus warned us. Why are we so taken aback by this? Jesus warns us. It'll be like the days of Noah when I return. What differentiates the days of Noah? Nephilim,
Yeah.
fallen angels mixing their seed. Genesis 3:15. I mean, we've only been doing this for an hour here, and we've
Yeah.
scratched the surface. 13 books, 30 films. I mean, you're looking at hours, decades of research, and you're not going to get it in an hour,
No.
an hour
No.
interview. Just not. You gotta do your homework.
Well, I'll ask you one more question then.
Sure, it's
Um,
okay. I can go a little long for you.
Pope Francis. I'll get to the question in a second. Pope Francis has had has been very vocal about extraterrestrials and so on. I know that they have the Vatican have already positioned that they would baptize um, anything from outer space. Do you think he's significant in this upcoming deception?
I think he's part of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
The Vatican has already released 2 or 3 books. I've read them all, um, from theologians, from lay people writing on it. Um, they are they're all over this, and they're part of the problem. They're part of
yeah,
the problem. They don't understand Genesis 3:15. I mean, I'll sit down with Mr. Pope. I'll sit
yeah,
down with him and talk with him, but I mean, that'll never happen. But they're already part of the problem. They're already promulgating the great deception, and they don't understand what they're looking at, and it's supernatural, and it is an extremely nefarious agenda here. And
mhm,
it all look, we've got nine. We're going to have 9 films done. I mean,
yeah,
I'm passionate about them. 9 films. I mean, it's like over nine. It's like 10, 11 hours worth of films from 1 to 9. Now, 7, 8, and 9 are not up there, but they will be by
yeah,
the end of the year. I promise you, on our streaming site. And we lay down the case from a Christian viewpoint, Christian worldview. Everything's tied back in the scripture, and we're connecting the dots so you don't have to. This is
yeah,
the coming great deception. This is going to change everything. There's a
mhm,
saying, I'll leave you with this. It's a saying I came up with years ago at Prophecy Watchers when I was talking to Gary Stearman. We go up, they come down. We go up, they show up. Recently, Mondo Gonzalez and I were talking about this, and Jeff Van Hatten and Mondo had been talking. Jeff Van Hatten's a researcher. We
mhm,
have 3 instances in Scripture. We have Elijah going up, and people see him go up. We have Jesus who ascends, and the disciples watch him go up. We
mhm,
have a third one in which many people, after Jesus is crucified and he dies, and people in Jerusalem see many of the dead
yeah,
rise up,
yeah,
right? And finally, we've got the 2 witnesses in Revelation where the entire world watches them go up.
mhm,
Is it possible that the rapture of the church is a global event that people see?
yeah.
And as we go up, right, and it appears that we disappear in the ships, that's when they come down.
Have you ever seen there was a card game brought out in 1995 called the Illuminati? It's a
Yes,
card
I'm
game.
familiar with the card game. Yes.
Yeah, that they actually have a card in reference to the rapture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I've seen.
it
Yeah.
shows you a picture from outer space. It's on the Earth,
Yeah.
and it's just I just thought I'd bring it up because it correlates to what you're saying. Um, Thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming
And
on.
shoot me an email. Shoot
Yes,
me an email. I am tingling. We
yeah,
are. I think we're going to come over there. We just
there
got to
are
look at the
lots
calendar
of
and figure it
places
out.
to go around. Yeah, yeah, 100%. We'll be involved. We'll help out as much as possible, get you a place to stay and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, and we'll tour. We'll show you.
And if we come over to film, we're going to
Yeah,
do a conference.
praise God, fantastic.
Do a
That's
conference.
awesome. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, guys. God bless you all.
God
Merry
bless.
Christmas.
God bless. Merry Christmas. It's initializing. Always the way with technology. There we go. So for those that are coming on now, I just want to introduce our guest.